Hi everyone. Welcome to English Story School. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be a winner? Not just someone who takes home the prize, but someone who makes history? Think about it for a second. Every great achievement, every monumental change began with a moment where someone decided they wouldn't settle for less. They said, "No mercy. Only winners make history." But what does that really mean? It's more than just a slogan. It's a mindset, a way of living that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Let me take you back to a story that will open your eyes and spark something deep inside you. Part 1. The beginning of the journey. Picture this: a young boy named Alex, growing up in a small town where dreams were often buried beneath the weight of doubt and limitation. He wasn't born with a silver spoon, nor did he have the luxury of wealth or privilege. The house he grew up in was small, and the opportunities in his town were scarce. Every day, he watched as others around him settled for mediocrity, but not Alex. There was something in his eyes, something deeper than the circumstances that defined him. He had a fire inside him that burned with a singular purpose: to prove to the world that greatness wasn't defined by where you came from, but by where you chose to go. It wasn't easy, though. In his town, success was something distant, almost like a dream that seemed too far to reach. Everyone around him said the same thing: "You're just another kid with big dreams." But dreams are for the lucky, the fortunate, not for us. But Alex was different. He didn't see dreams as fantasies. He saw them as challenges, something to fight for. Where most saw obstacles, he saw opportunities. The more people told him it couldn't be done, the more it fueled his fire. As a child, he often spent hours alone, staring at the stars, wondering about the world beyond his small town. "One day, I will make my mark. I will be the one to change the game," he would whisper to himself. It wasn't arrogance. It was belief. Alex believed that in every battle, the real fight was not with the world around him, but with the doubts within him. It was this belief that separated him from the rest, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. His school years were full of trials. He wasn't the smartest, and he certainly didn't have the best resources. But what he did have was an unyielding spirit, a relentless drive to push past every limitation. The other kids would laugh at his worn-out shoes or mock him for his humble background, but he never let it get to him. Instead, he used every insult, every rejection, as fuel. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall, he reminded himself, quoting the words that fueled his dreams. One summer, when he was 16, he decided to enter a local competition that everyone else thought was impossible for him. It was a talent show, one that attracted the best in the area. The other contestants had the advantage of years of training, expensive equipment, and professional guidance. Alex, on the other hand, only had his raw passion. His heart and determination were his only tools. The day of the competition, he stood backstage, nervous but excited. He could hear the others rehearsing their polished routines, while he was left to practice alone in the corner. A voice in his head told him to quit, to walk away, and save himself from embarrassment. "What do you think you're doing? You don't belong here," the voice whispered. But then, Alex remembered the fire that burned inside him. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, wiped the sweat from his brow, and whispered, "You're not here to blend in. You're here to stand out." When it was his turn, Alex took the stage. He wasn't perfect. His performance was raw, unrefined, but it was full of passion. It was a piece of his soul on display for the world to see. The crowd was silent at first, unsure of what to expect. But as he continued, something changed. There was something magnetic about his energy, something that pulled the audience in. They weren't just watching a performance. They were witnessing a transformation, a boy who dared to be different, who refused to be defined by his circumstances. When the performance ended, There was a moment of silence. Then, slowly, the applause began. It wasn't the loudest or the longest applause, but to Alex, it felt like the loudest roar he had ever heard. He had done it. He had taken the first step toward proving that he could rise above the limitations. In that moment, that small victory became the foundation for everything to come. Alex didn't win the competition that day, but he won something far more valuable. He won belief in himself. It was a belief that would carry him through every battle that lay ahead. He realized that victory wasn't just about crossing the finish line first. It was about having the courage to start the race in the first place. The next few years were filled with more trials, more rejection, and more moments when the road ahead seemed impossible. But Alex's mindset had shifted. He now understood that life wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment or the right circumstances. It was about taking action, no matter how imperfect or uncertain the path seemed. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail, he reminded himself. And that was how Alex began his journey. Not with a grand plan or a smooth path, but with a belief that no matter how hard the journey, no matter how many times life knocked him down, he would always rise. He wasn't waiting for the world to give him an opportunity. He was going to create his own. Through every failure, every setback, he only grew stronger. It was the beginning of a journey that would define his life. And as he walked that path, he carried one simple truth with him. You never know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice. And for Alex, strength was no longer a choice. It was his only option. So, this is just the beginning. The first chapter of a story that will change the course of his life forever. And as we continue to follow Alex's journey, remember that no matter where you start, no matter how small or insignificant you may feel, you have the power within you to rise above, to fight, and to make history. Because, in the end, only the winners make history. And Alex was just getting started. Part 2. The struggles that forge strength. Alex's journey was never easy. At every corner, there was resistance. It came from all directions, his family, his friends, and most of all, from within himself. The voices around him were loud, constantly telling him that success was for those who had the right connections, the right education, or the right background. But Alex didn't have any of those things. What he did have, however, was an unrelenting will to prove that he could rise above every barrier and that nothing, absolutely nothing, would stand in the way of his dreams. It wasn't long before the weight of these obstacles started to take a toll. There were moments when he found himself questioning everything, his path, his goals, his strength. Am I wasting my time? Am I just fooling myself? These thoughts would plague him on sleepless nights as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering whether all the effort was worth it. And then the doubts would surface. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't strong enough. Maybe he wasn't cut out for this after all. But even in those moments of weakness, Alex knew one thing. He couldn't stop. Because stopping wasn't an option. He remembered the words his grandfather had told him when he was younger. Strength is not measured by how much you can lift, but by how much you can bear and keep moving forward. Those words kept echoing in his mind, like a distant drumbeat, pushing him forward even when everything inside him wanted to give up. The real test came when he left his small town in search of a better life. It wasn't the usual path for someone like him, someone without a network, without resources. But Alex wasn't the kind of person who waited for things to happen. He made them happen. With a few dollars in his pocket and a head full of dreams, he set out to prove that nothing could hold him back. However, the city he moved to was not the land of opportunity he had imagined. He found himself working long hours at jobs that barely paid enough to survive. He had to deal with difficult bosses, ungrateful co-workers, and the crushing feeling of being unnoticed in a sea of faces. In the middle of every difficulty lies opportunity, Albert Einstein once said, and Alex clung to that belief, even when things seemed darkest. But at times, the weight of failure seemed too much to bear. His body was tired, his mind was weary, and the loneliness was unbearable. He wondered if it would ever get better, if the struggle would ever be worth it. The city felt cold. It was overwhelming, and it made him question if he was truly cut out for such a life. Every day was a battle, and every small victory was met with a new, greater challenge. But despite it all, Alex pushed forward. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't pretty. There were days when his dreams seemed too far, too impossible. But it was in those moments, when the world seemed to be collapsing around him, that Alex discovered the true meaning of resilience. His story wasn't about immediate success. It wasn't about the first big break or the first paycheck. It was about the days when he felt like giving up but chose not to. When the weight of disappointment threatened to pull him down, he dug deeper. Every rejection letter, every failed attempt, and every challenge only made him more determined. And through every trial, Alex grew stronger. Not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. The hardships had become his teachers, shaping him, molding him into someone who could never be broken. There were days when Alex worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet, sometimes not even knowing how he would get through the week. But he learned something crucial during those years. Strength is not built in moments of comfort, but in the hardest times. The pain, the exhaustion, the struggle. These were the things that shaped him into the person he was becoming. It wasn't the easy moments that would define him, but the ones that tested him. The greatest strength is the one that comes when you don't have the energy to keep going, but you do anyway. One particularly difficult week, when the bills were piling up and the weight of his circumstances felt too heavy to bear, Alex thought about quitting. But as he walked back to his tiny apartment, the words of his late mother whispered in his ear, "You were born to rise, not to fall." That was the moment he knew for sure. Giving up wasn't an option. Not when he had come this far. Not when he had endured so much. Every obstacle he faced now became a symbol of what was possible. He began to realize that each struggle, no matter how overwhelming, was simply preparing him for something greater. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, the saying went, and Alex was living proof of it. His growth wasn't just physical or financial. It was spiritual, emotional, and mental. The deeper the struggle, the sweeter the victory. He learned that pain was not something to be avoided, but embraced. In every battle, whether internal or external, Alex saw an opportunity for growth. When he was exhausted, he pushed forward. When he was rejected, he tried again. When people doubted him, he proved them wrong. He understood that true greatness isn't built in the absence of failure. It's built because of it. And so, with each setback, Alex continued to rise. The darkest hour is just before the dawn, he reminded himself as he pushed through, knowing that the light at the end of the tunnel was coming. Through every hardship, Alex discovered his true strength. Not because things got easier, but because he refused to let life defeat him. He fought back against his doubts, his fears, and the world that seemed determined to keep him down. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't meant to be. But that was the point. Because no matter how hard it got, Alex understood one thing: no mercy, no giving up, only winners. He had learned that true strength is not found in moments of comfort, but in moments of struggle. And in those moments, Alex found himself stronger, more determined, and ready for whatever came next. Part 3. The critical turning point. There comes a moment in every person's life when they are faced with a choice that will define their future. For Alex, That moment arrived when he least expected it, a moment that was both terrifying and exhilarating. After years of struggle, late nights, and sacrifices, an opportunity presented itself, a chance to change his life forever. But as with all great opportunities, it came with a price. It wasn't the type of choice that would come easily. It wasn't the type of path that would guarantee success or safety. It was the type of opportunity that would require everything he had. He was standing at the crossroads. On one side, there was the comfort of staying where he was. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't exciting, but it was safe. The familiar struggles, the daily grind, the predictable future. Nothing more, nothing less. On the other side was the unknown. It was risky, uncertain, and filled with potential failure. But it was also the path that led to everything Alex had dreamed of. It was the path that could take him to greatness. And in that moment, as Alex stood on the precipice of change, he had to make the most important decision of his life. Do I take the safe route? Or do I dare to go after what I've always wanted? Fear gripped his heart like a vice. The fear of failure was suffocating. The fear of falling short, of losing everything he had worked so hard for, was overwhelming. What if he failed? What if he wasn't good enough? What if the world was right all along, and he was just another dreamer destined to fall short? His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, all pulling him in different directions. Maybe I should wait, he thought. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'll just take the safe route for now and try again later. But deep inside him, a different voice spoke. It wasn't loud, but it was firm. It was the voice of every struggle he had endured, every challenge he had overcome. It was the voice of his dreams, his purpose, calling him to take the leap. You've come this far. You've fought for this. You've earned the right to take this chance. Don't let fear decide your future. Alex knew that if he didn't take the leap now, he might regret it for the rest of his life. He knew that in order to truly break free from his past and build the future he longed for, he had to push past his fear and embrace the unknown. And so, despite every ounce of fear, despite the voices in his head telling him to play it safe, Alex chose to leap. He chose the path where there was no safety net. The only option was to succeed. It wasn't about being fearless. It was about being willing to face the fear and take action anyway. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill's words echoed in his mind. It was a truth Alex had known all along, but had never fully understood until this moment. The transformation that Alex experienced wasn't just external, it was internal. Something inside him clicked, something shifted in the very core of his being. As soon as he made the decision, a wave of clarity washed over him. He understood that greatness wasn't something you waited for. It wasn't something that came to you when everything was perfect. Greatness was something you had to pursue, even when the road ahead was unclear. It was in those moments of uncertainty that real magic happened. The kind of magic that changed not only your circumstances, but your entire perspective on life. As Alex took the first step down the uncertain path, he realized that the fear, the doubt, the discomfort, they weren't signs to stop. They were signs that he was on the right track. Every step forward, no matter how uncertain, was a step closer to his dreams. The deeper the fear, the greater the reward. And in that moment, Alex knew that true success wasn't just about achieving the goal. It was about having the courage to face the struggle and keep moving forward, no matter the odds. The journey was far from over, but Alex was no longer the same person who had stood at the crossroads filled with doubt. He was someone who had made a choice, someone who had embraced the discomfort of uncertainty and turned it into power. The only way to do great work is to love what you do, Steve Jobs once said. Alex didn't just love what he was about to do. He had become addicted to the pursuit of greatness, to the thrill of pushing past his limits, and to the belief that the impossible was possible as long as you were willing to fight for it. As the days passed, Alex noticed something incredible happening. The challenges he faced seemed less daunting. The fear he had felt before now felt like fuel, pushing him to take risks, to go further than he had ever imagined. And each small victory along the way built his confidence, making him realize that success was not a destination, but a journey, one that required constant growth, constant effort, and the willingness to embrace the discomfort of change. But perhaps the most profound change was the shift in Alex's mindset. He realized that life would never be free from obstacles. There would always be challenges, always be moments when the path ahead seemed too steep, too difficult. But what mattered most wasn't the obstacles themselves. It was how you responded to them. Obstacles are those frightful things you see when you take your eyes off your goal, said Henry Ford, and Alex understood this better than ever. He understood that the obstacles were not his enemy. They were the very things that would shape him into the person he was meant to be. With every step, Alex grew stronger. The fear that once paralyzed him had now become his ally, and he embraced the uncertainty, knowing that it was the key to unlocking his true potential. It's not the years in your life that count. It's the life in your years. Abraham Lincoln's words echoed in his mind as he pushed forward, determined to make every moment count. And so, with every leap of faith, every risk, Alex's transformation continued. He wasn't just working toward success. He was becoming the person he had always dreamed of being. The person who didn't just dream of greatness, but who was willing to fight for it every single day. This moment was a turning point, a critical decision that would shape the rest of his life. It wasn't about choosing the path with the least resistance. It was about choosing the path that would make him stronger, that would make him better. Alex had chosen to embrace the uncertainty, and in doing so, he had taken the first step toward a future far greater than he could have ever imagined. Part 4. The Victory. Alex's journey didn't just end with him crossing the finish line. It was a moment of absolute triumph. When he first set out, he couldn't have imagined where the road would take him. There were so many unknowns, so many challenges that at times, the light at the end of the tunnel seemed impossible to reach. Yet, here he stood at the pinnacle of success, and as he looked out over everything he had fought for, he realized something profound. It wasn't just the victory that mattered. Yes, the accolades, the recognition, the sense of accomplishment. Those were the outward markers of success, but they didn't capture the full picture. What Alex truly saw now, as he stood at the top, was not just a reflection of his achievements, but a reflection of who he had become in the process. He had fought, he had struggled, and he had endured. And in doing so, he had transformed into someone unrecognizable to the person he was when he first began. When Alex reached the point of success, it wasn't a big celebration with fireworks or a grand award ceremony. It was quiet. The victory was internal. He was alone with his thoughts, looking back on the long road he had traveled, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, and the countless sacrifices. And in that stillness, he realized that every single moment had brought him to this place, this quiet but powerful moment of victory. But the real beauty of it wasn't just in the trophy or the title or even the applause. It was in the realization that every step, every failure, every setback had been part of the process. Success is the sum of small efforts, repeated day in and day out. These words echoed in his mind. For Alex, success wasn't a singular event. It was the culmination of years of hard work, resilience, and constant pushing forward. even when the road seemed impossible. Every small victory along the way had mattered more than the final one. Each effort had built upon the last. Each failure had taught him something valuable, and each challenge had made the victory that much sweeter. Alex's success wasn't simply about achieving his goals. It was about the person he had become along the way. He had crossed many finish lines, each one leading to another challenge. And yet the victory was always about more than the external rewards. It was about building the character, the strength, and the fortitude to rise above every obstacle that life threw his way. He had realized that true success was not measured by what you achieved, but by who you became in the process. As he stood on the summit of his journey, he understood something that many never did. The road to greatness wasn't paved with shortcuts, with easy wins, or with the avoidance of failure. It was paved with courage, resilience, and relentless determination. It was about embracing every twist and turn, every setback, and every challenge as a necessary part of the journey. The greatest victories, he realized, were never those that came easily. They were the ones that were hard-earned, the ones that tested your limits and forced you to grow. It was at this moment, as Alex reflected on everything he had been through, that he realized something extraordinary. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, they had been his greatest teachers. The struggles had not only made him stronger, but they had given him a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly win. He had never been afraid of failing. In fact, he had welcomed failure, for it was in those moments of failure that he had learned the most about himself. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall, he thought. And this was the moment of his greatest rise. Alex had always known that there was more to success than just reaching a destination. It was about the journey, the trials, and the people you became along the way. Now that he was standing at the pinnacle, he realized that the victory wasn't just his. It was shared with everyone who had supported him, with everyone who had pushed him to be better, with every person who had challenged him to keep going when he thought he couldn't. The victory was not just about one person winning. It was about the collective power of resilience, belief, and perseverance. In the end, Alex's journey was not defined by one singular victory. It wasn't defined by the rewards, the recognition, or the accolades. His victory was defined by his growth, his strength, and the understanding that success was never the end. It was a continuous process, a lifelong commitment to striving for greatness no matter what. No mercy, only winners. It wasn't just a phrase to him anymore. It had become his life's mantra, the guiding principle that had carried him through the darkest of times and led him to the brightest moments of his life. As Alex looked around, he realized that the finish line wasn't just a destination. It was a new beginning. The victory wasn't an endpoint. It was a new chapter, one that would be filled with even greater challenges, more learning, and greater opportunities to grow. And Alex was ready for it. He was no longer the same person who had first started this journey. He had become someone who truly understood that the road to greatness is long, difficult, and full of obstacles, but is also beautiful, rewarding, and worth every step. He had come so far, and yet, in this moment of victory, he knew that his journey was far from over. And with that realization, Alex took the first step into the next phase of his life, knowing that whatever came next, he was ready. Because true winners don't stop at victory. They keep going, they keep striving, and they keep pushing forward. Part 5, The Legacy. Alex didn't stop at just being a winner. For him, success wasn't the final destination. It was just the beginning. He had learned early on that achieving greatness was not enough if it didn't help others along the way. He realized that his victory meant little unless it was shared, unless it sparked something in others. As he stood tall, basking in the fruits of his labor, he understood that his true purpose now lay in inspiring those around him. It wasn't about hoarding success or accolades. It was about giving back, about being the kind of person who could help others find their own path to greatness. His story became the fuel for others to dream bigger, to break through their own barriers. He didn't just want to be known as someone who succeeded. He wanted to be remembered as someone who lifted others up, who helped them believe that they, too, could achieve the impossible. The only limit to our realization of tomorrow is our doubts of today. Franklin D. Roosevelt's words echoed in his heart, and Alex knew that he had to show others that their limitations were nothing more than illusions. The impossible was only a matter of perspective. As Alex stepped into his new role as a mentor and guide, he became a living testament to what could be achieved when one refused to settle. He took others under his wing, young dreamers, ambitious souls who, like him, were struggling to find their way. And with every piece of advice, every word of encouragement, he ignited sparks of hope in their hearts. They began to believe that they, too, could accomplish what they once thought was beyond their reach. Alex's legacy wasn't just about his success. It was about the ripple effect of that success. It was about the countless individuals who had been inspired by his journey, who had been empowered to break free from their own chains of doubt and fear. He had become a beacon of light in a world that sometimes seemed dim, reminding everyone that no dream was too big, no mountain too high. His story proved that the only thing standing between you and your success was the belief that you could achieve it. As Alex's wisdom spread, his message was clear, powerful, and unwavering. Never settle for mediocrity. Never let fear dictate your future. Never let doubts silence your dreams. Success is not how high you have climbed, but how you make a positive difference to the world around you, said Roy T. Bennett, and Alex lived by this truth. He knew that the true measure of success wasn't in the accolades, but in the lives he touched and the change he inspired. Every person he helped, every life he touched, was a testament to the idea that greatness was not just for a select few. It was for anyone who dared to rise above their circumstances and chase after it. In every conversation, Alex encouraged those who were still struggling, those who were still fighting their own battles. He told them to embrace every challenge, every failure, every step, because in the end, those who refuse to give mercy to their doubts, their fears, and their limitations are the ones who create history. The people who make the biggest impact on the world are the ones who face their struggles head-on, who don't let the fear of failure hold them back. These are the people who, like Alex, turn their hardships into fuel for their success. And as Alex continued to inspire others, he often found himself reflecting on his own journey. He thought about the days when he was uncertain, the moments when he wanted to quit, the struggles that seemed impossible to overcome. He realized that every part of the journey had been necessary, not just for him, but for those he would help. Every challenge had made him stronger, had made him the person he was today. It was through his own rise that he had learned how to lift others up. Now, Alex's purpose was no longer just about winning. It was about creating a legacy built on courage, resilience, and the power of believing in the impossible. He became a symbol, not of victory, but of transformation. His message, his story, was no longer his own. It was a torch passed on to others who would continue to light the way for the generations to come. And so, Alex's legacy grew through the lives he changed, through the dreams he inspired, and through the many who, having seen his story, decided to rise, to push forward, and to make their own mark on history. He had shown them that they, too, could achieve the impossible. All they had to do was take that first step. So what will your story be? Will you be the one who settles for average? Or will you rise, push forward, and make your mark on history? Remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Take that first step today, because the world needs your story. The world needs your courage, your dreams, and your belief in what is possible. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.